and a PATCO, PATCO high-speed line, which is heavy commuter rail. It's about a 15-mile rail line that transports people, again, to and from between southern New Jersey and the city of Philadelphia. When I took over here as the CEO, I'd been the CFO for almost 9 years. We were faced with an organization that, while we had very dedicated workers, hard workers, people who knew their jobs and were dedicated to doing their jobs, people were siloed and even compartmentalized within silos. It was hard to get the organization to see itself as one unit, as a team. And for that reason, collaboration and even basic communication often suffered. And that did impact internal processes and our service to our customers. And so after reading a couple of books that talked about back in the 2011, 2012 timeframe about applied improv being sort of cutting edge leadership, working with Christina Maroney, who is our Director of Strategic Initiatives, we put a program together. It started off with just she and I sort of doing it. We ran the curriculum, and then ultimately we knew we needed more help. And we looked to some improvisers that I'd become acquainted with in the city of Philadelphia. The first guy that we ever used was an improviser named Matt Holmes, who did a one-off workshop. And then a man named Rob Alessiani came in and helped run the program for us. And ultimately, he took a full-time job with PATCO, and Nick Gillette came in. We've seen an improvement in relationships, in communication, in collaboration, and also believe that people are developing the skills like empathy, listening, supporting each other, and putting themselves in other people's shoes. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our Director of Strategic Initiatives, Christina Maroney.
Thank you, John. Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be here today because when we were here back in March doing the formal presentation, we talked a lot about improvisational exercises and some of the issues that we faced as an organization over the last 7 to 10 years. Today is going to be an opportunity to actually practice what we do here regularly at the DRPA and PATCO in terms of our leadership development programs. As John had just mentioned, it has been transformational for me personally, but as an organization, the way that we engage, interact, people have such higher energy. And the one thing I just want to say is this is not going to be comfortable for everyone. I've been doing this for 7+ years and I still feel uncomfortable, but you just kind of have to embrace the uncomfortable nature of this, take some risks, have fun. You know, there's no pressure, but it's a really good opportunity just to see when you suspend sort of your status and you're worrying about what people are going to say next or how you're going to respond. It really inhibits the listening process. So, you know, listen carefully to what everyone is saying and just, you know, improvise, speak off the top of your head. And so, you know, at the time when we move forward, and I'll introduce Nick in a moment, you know, please put your cameras on, your mics on, and just have fun with it and see where it goes. With that, I would like to introduce Nick Gillette. Nick is part of our leadership development team here at the DRPA and PATCO. Nick is a renowned improv instructor from Philadelphia who has over more than 2 decades of experience. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nick. You're all in very, very good hands.
Thanks, Christina. Yeah, hi, everyone. I'm Nick. I'm happy to have this opportunity to explain a little bit about what I've been doing with DRPA PATCO, about applied improv more generally and how it fits into other organizations, and hopefully provide for you a few fun activities that will allow you to understand it, not just like an intellectual idea, but to really give it a try. The analogy I always like to use with improvisation is it's a lot like swimming. If you read a book about swimming, you might think like, oh yeah, no, I understand. Okay, that's this stroke. Okay, I understand. But it's not swimming, right? The only way to know it is to do it. So thank you all for attending and agreeing to dip your toes in the water. Before we get to the interactive portion though, we thought it was going to be a good idea to show you some of the things that we've been up to at DRPA PATCO. So I have a short video we took that I'd like to share with you now. Give me a moment to make sure I can share my screen with everyone. Here we go. And away we go.
Zip, zap, zap, zip, zap, zap, zip, zap,
Stop.
zip, zap, zap, zip, zap,
Stop.
zip, zap. Zip, zap, zap starts with someone just clapping, making eye contact and clapping towards someone and saying zip. And then Christina would send a zap to someone else. Go ahead. Zap. And then Mike would send a zap. You could say, cool. Get in my sports stance, like relaxed and ready. Yeah, everyone's in. Cool. I'll start us out. Zip. Zap. Zip. Zap. Zap. So this next game is called Fortune Cookie. It's about kind of creating a little snippet of language, just a little bit at a time, one word at a time. So we're actually going to go around the circle whenever it sends
Messages.
to
You. Remember. Words.
it sends messages to remember the words. It's kind of deep, all right? Let's do another one. Julie, you set us up.
One. Time.
This is a game, it's called 3-line scenes. It's very simple. Christine and I will start. So we are going to have, you'll begin. Whoever's on this side is going to, we say, initiate. It's like begin a scene. And this scene is going to be exactly 3 lines long.
Oh my god, I never expected this.
Yeah, it's difficult to expect a surprise party.
I know. I'm really excited though, and I hope you're surprised.
You know, I'm really confused about how I'm supposed to handle this.
When that happens to me, I always just open my eyes, my mind, and do what comes natural.
Well, right now I want to dance like a disco duck. Did you hear what happened in the parking lot?
Huh?
Did you hear?
So here's the last of the boxes, and you're free to go.
So this is it for me? I'm never coming back again?
I mean, unless you commit another crime. Very cool. Give yourself a round of applause. Nice.
Great. So hopefully, yeah, that's just a little taste. And we wanted to show you some demonstration of that when a group of people is together in the room. Naturally on Zoom, it's not going to be exactly the same. A huge part of improv and all of these tools that have to do with emotional intelligence and understanding another person, naturally they do work best when we are all together with other people. There's an immediacy of seeing and understanding and responding, even all the subtle cues of body language or just how a person is. Again, it can be a little tricky over Zoom, but that's sort of even into the deep end of things. The exercises we'll be doing all together are the very basics, the very easiest. But just to sort of introduce a few of those basics, just using those as those examples we just saw to talk about those exercises just for a moment. The first one that you saw, it's called Zip Zap Zop. This is as close to an improv universal game you will ever see. You could literally go to an improv theater in Tokyo and they might be playing Zip Zap Zop. It's a phenomenon, and it's a very simple game. what it really is about is not, of course, I mean, there is the silly sounds and like, okay, I'm a little embarrassed about saying these silly sounds, but if we're all in that little bit of embarrassment together, it actually kind of feels like, okay, we're all in this together. But what we're practicing is attention. We all give our attention naturally, right? But to practice it is something that we don't usually have a dedicated time for, a dedicated program, especially inside of the workplace. To really give our attention means an active amount of listening, to not wait ahead of time and think, okay, I know what this person's going to say, or sometimes we get into like a defensive listening mode where we're expecting what the other person is going to say and even pre-planning what we want to respond with. All of that is to say the way that we teach everyone in improv or in the workplace to listen is with curiosity, without any judgment, prejudgment, or even post-judgment, right? To really like hear entirely. And yeah, with a full attention rather than the sort of half of like, okay, I'm listening in my own head and I'm already thinking about what I'm going to say next. Easier said than done. Again, we all do it to different degrees, but to have a chance to practice is hopefully something that's become quite valuable. The second exercise that we saw is just a word at a time circle. There's 1,000 different variations of this game where everyone contributes just one word. That one was called fortune cookie. So it's just like a little snippet that you might find inside of a fortune cookie. Others, I've seen people write entire stories, one word at a time, letters, and even in different styles, radio plays. Like there's 1,000 things that can be done collaboratively writing. And the hardest part of that, and I think the lesson that emerges from that is, well, a few things. One is that sometimes what we're called on to do or to be is the in the sentence. So it's not the like shiny, like, oh, I'm going to like really like steer the story or put this interesting action or item inside of what we're building. But it's just being the glue that connects together the syntax, the sense of the thing. It's not the bright shining part, but it's sort of the underneath support, the grammar of that story still needs to be attended to. And that's just a small touch on what's actually a very huge lesson inside of improv, which we mentioned a little bit just about status and ego. There is, and I want to say this is a very like natural human thing. We have a desire to kind of preserve our status. We want to save face, of course, and nothing that we're teaching is about getting rid of that. It's more about understanding that the way that we behave with one another, no matter how much of a open-hearted improviser, egalitarian you believe yourself to be, you'll have to admit that the way you behave with your boss, say, is very different than the way you might behave with one of your direct reports. So just understanding a little bit of how we are with one another in different ways. And yeah, again, this is a light touch on what's ultimately a very big lesson inside of improv, is to give up on the superstardom of a thing and really support. The word I want to put in everyone's mind is improv is without a doubt about support, and not just our direct reports support us, but through servant leadership, our leadership supports everyone in the organization. And that is hopefully the most wholesome way of running and developing leadership for an individual and really across an organization. The last exercise you saw is called 3-line scenes. And this one's more about creativity and risk. I think it's one of the most frightening parts of improvisation is when you are put on the spot to given permission to say, and now you can say anything, right? Practically anything you want. Of course, within the confines of like decency and civil behavior, but still, an unbounded field is one of the hardest things to step into, to say what, really anything, to trust ourselves, to spontaneously generate something. It is a risk. And what allows that risk with practice inside of a group is trust. Trust allows risk. If I know that I'm going to try something new, let's say we're prototyping something new inside the workplace, and I'm afraid it's going to fail, right? I might not even be willing to try. I might think, well, the penalties for this failure are too high, and as a result, I'm just going to do it the way it's always been. And over time, the entire organization can get stagnant. We stop learning things. We stop experimenting. So with a collaborative environment that really centers trust and risk and the ability to make competent mistakes, to try something out, is for any business, any organization, an absolutely critical ingredient if you don't want to be stagnant in any way. And yeah, three-line scenes, again, it's about the risk of whoever's speaking up first. You're setting up this entire thing. And then it's more of just listening and responding. We have to hear exactly where they are and then respond to it. And of course, the third line is responding to that response. There's no way to plan it ahead of time. And there's no way to do it other than to be in it. At the very heart of that particular exercise is this improv principle called yes and. If you've heard of anything about improv, you've likely run into the phrase yes and. It has to do with agreement, which is not necessarily saying yes, but just, oh, okay, I agree, we're on the same page, we're talking about the same thing, we're building the same scene together. And the and part is about providing our own unique spin, our vantage point, or our thoughts on whatever this is. On stage, this is what allows us to build a scene or an entire play out of nothing. In the workplace, this is what allows us to collaborate freely, to create without judgment. It's impossible to be both creative and to evaluate at the same time. You kind of have to set those things apart. Is this our creative brainstorming mode, or is this when we really look at the nitty-gritty and kind of figure things out? You really can't have one without the understanding of the other. But that being said, this is just a kind of a broad overview of explaining some of the things that we've just seen. I'd like to invite all of you to give this exercise a try. This was one, it's called The Vacation. And I'm going to explain how the first part of this is going to work. In a moment, you're going to see a little pop-up that's asking you to go into a breakout room. You're going to be randomly assigned into groups of 5, so you'll be there with 4 new people. I encourage you, turn your cameras on, turn your microphones on, and even in the top right corner of your Zoom window, there's this little view. You can put it in gallery view or speaker view. I suggest put it in gallery view. That's why you're able to see everyone. Great, I see some people already doing that. Feel free to turn your cameras on now if you'd like. Put that in gallery view so you see, it's like the Brady Bunch we are right now. And that'll, so when we're in your breakout rooms, here's the task at hand. The first thing that I'd like you to do is to just develop an order. Someone say, okay, I'll be A, someone else will be B and C and D and E. That's just to set an order. And once you've done that, the task is for whoever is person A, they are going to suggest a plan for a group vacation. The 5 of you are going to take together. I want to really emphasize this is not bound by any traditional practicality of planning a vacation. You can freely use your imagination. If you want to eat grapes with Cleopatra on the moon, totally legit. Do whatever you'd like. There's no limit to that. And yeah, so after that first person A is like, oh, let's do this. Everyone going down the line, B and C and D, are going to respond to that idea. And the response is going to start with the words, no, because. So person A will contribute, oh, why don't we do this? B will say no because, C will say no because, D will say no because, E will say no because, and then A will get to kind of respond to that and maybe suggest something to further the conversation, and then keep going around the circle. B, C, D, and E will all say no because, no because, no because, no because, and then A will have to continue down that line. Great. Are there any questions before we begin? Does that sound generally got the sense of it? I'm seeing nods. Great. Okay, cool. So yeah, Amit, if you don't mind, please put us into those breakout rooms. We'll have about 3 minutes to play. You'll have about 3 minutes and then we'll scoop everyone back into this room. But go ahead and if you see your pop-up saying, oh, please go to this breakout room, you can go ahead and select that now. I see people are figuring it out. Good, good, good. Great, great. We're all back together. See a handful of people smiling. All right, looks good. Looks good. So yeah, I encourage you keep your camera on. We'll simulate the experience of being in a room all together as much as we can, just to see how many people we are and we're speaking to. But yeah, I wanted to ask a question first of everyone who was in the A role. Just raise your hand if you were one of the people. I see Judy and Lori or the others, Brett. Yeah, great. So a quick question just for the three of you, and feel free to unmute. We can chat a little bit. But I want you to first, I want to ask first about the experience of being in that A role in the first version of this, the no because. Just what was that like inside of that?
It was challenging to bring together everybody's concerns and, respond to them and try to also, overcome them with a suggestion for something that would work for everyone.
Yeah, that's a good way to like accommodate, but also overcome. Like, okay, I see your concern, and also I don't want to listen to it. It's like, yeah, it's I get that sense. I've been in a lot of meetings that have that exact tone to them. Lori, what about you?
Oh, I think that we were all having fun with it, and it felt like I was impressed with all of the many reasons why this was a bad idea that I had thrown out there, but I was still trying to come up with ways to jolly people into it. And I wasn't taking any of it real personally because it was a kind of ridiculous suggestion I had thrown out in the first place. So
what was the first suggestion?
Oh, I had suggested that we all go fat mountain biking up in Stowe, Vermont.
Oh, that sounds like a fantastic idea. I would have hated to be in the no because group. That sounds great. Brett, how about yourself? What was the experience of being just confronted with no?
I felt disheartened, and despite my best efforts to convince my group, I couldn't get them to come around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, part of it's, I'm sure you're a savvy negotiator. Part of it is the assignment of you're going to get a no matter what. But yeah, despite that, I think, it has a feeling of kind of despondence, right? It makes work feel a lot like work when it's like, okay, I will come up with something else then, right? If not this, then I guess I'll go back to the drawing board. And now I kind of want to open this to anyone, if you want to answer this. What was the difference compared to when we played with the yes and? Just what was the feel of those rooms?
Hey, Nick, just really quick, I think Irina has her hand up.
Oh, I can only see about 20 of us. But yeah, go ahead and Irina, go ahead and what's your question? Oh, I see. Yeah.
It wasn't a question. I was responding. I was an A with a no but my approach was, I used what you offered. So originally I offered a very broad, fantastic idea. And when people started saying what are the buts and the no's, I kept expanding it, embracing, not shortening, but instead saying, you know what, we have the whole world and all the sci-fi is on our side. So yes, sure, we can do that too. I did put one little, correction to my original idea based on the no but suggestion. And so the only thing is that I wish it was possible to use that strategy in the real world too. When you have limitless opportunities, you can just embrace all the comments. Yeah, not as easy as it's, or I should say, much easier in these fictional scenarios with no limits. Yeah, and I think as we go forward and we talk more about like yes and, it's worth acknowledging right away that like improv training is not about turning us all into like yes machines,
right? There are some excellent reasons for no, right? When we're at our own personal limits or our expertise tells us like, this isn't going to happen. It's more about meeting someone's idea where this is. And anytime we're in a situation where we would want to start with no, that can't be done, to instead be curious about what makes you think this might be possible, or to approach it even as, oh, I might be missing something, because to me, this sounds like these things would make that not work. It's more of a disposition than like a toolkit after a while to really look at the, no, how do we yes our way, even when we're like really in a position where we must disagree, or we have to bring contrary information. How can we still do that constructively? There's a ton of exercises that are built all around that. This is just a little taste of it. But yeah, I hear that. To make the idea wider, like, okay, what will please you people, right? Like, okay, and it's something else then, right? It's an impossible task in that first room. But yeah, thanks for giving that. Now, but let me open up the floor now. Anyone who is in any of those roles, how did it compare, just the feeling of that first room compared to the second one?
To me, it felt there was a lot of enthusiasm. It was building on ideas and excitement and limitless possibilities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Other thoughts?
I found it difficult to do the no answer. I felt badly about coming up with reasons why we couldn't do it. And that can be hard, because in the workplace, you do get that, a lot of naysayers that shoot down an idea before it's even been fleshed out or developed further. So, much easier to say yes, and how about this type of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and especially in these like purely creative things, like we all want to just play along, right? It's more generative when we're agreeing and creating something else, rather than like, let's strike down every idea and then have to do the uphill work of coming up with something else. But again, to reiterate, like, we're practicing the no and the yes in very like crystal clear terms. But that feeling that you mentioned, the like, oh, I don't want to be the downer, right? I don't want to say no to this idea, I think is like a really valid concern. And it puts us in an interesting position where if there's some, whatever organizational meeting needs someone to say no, how do we do that with honesty, right? How do we do that without being the downer of a thing? How do we do that in a way that is constructive and continues the conversation, even if we have to like evaluate and close off certain avenues? It's a tough balance, but at the core of it is some sense of just honesty and candor as a huge component of a lot of this work. But I'm kind of getting ahead of ourselves. In these very simple ideas, I think you're right. It's a blast to be in a room full of people who are all agreeing with your idea and saying yes, and also let me add my piece. The difference is not just vibes, but chiefly it's a feeling, right? It's a collaborative environment. It is an agreement ahead of time that we will listen to each other, that we will take each other's ideas seriously, that we will construct as much as can be constructed within our confinements. Just as a first approach. And it's not a silver bullet, right? There are times where I've heard people say yes and but, like, it's not like there's still, you have to not just say the words yes and, you have to really understand the, like, okay, what are we building together? What are we collaborating for? Even if we're in opposition somehow, what goals do we have aligned? How do we begin there? Again, I'm kind of unfolding a lot out of this very simple exercise, but that's at the core of a lot of the improv that we practice, is how to get our first instinct to be curiosity rather than judgment. Last thoughts on this exercise before we move on? Anything else?
Yes, Nick. For one thing, Brett did a fantastic job, especially with the yes. And it's hard to say yes when you don't agree. I think one of the areas he said, I'm bringing avocado dip. And I'm like, I hate avocado, but I like the color green. So let me say I like the color green. So it's trying to find, even the simplest things. to agree upon.
Yeah, that's a very positive approach. Like, it's like, yes, and I will leave plenty of that dip for others because I don't need it at all. Yeah, and yeah, I think, yeah, like that approach, that looking for the silver lining, even in like gloomy scenarios, is not always our first instinct, right? It's something that does and can take a little practice. And frequently in the workplace or in business, there are some like meetings that are going to be like, this is the dire scenario we're in, right? There's a lot of guacamole on the table. How do we deal with this, right? Not just to look at it and be like, okay, we're all happy, super positive, but to meet it honestly, right? To say like, okay, this is not something I can eat right now, right? That, like, I'm kind of stretching this analogy as far as it can go, but that first response that you had of like, okay, how do I find the silver lining of this? There is something always to be found, I think. Rad. Cool. So I have one other exercise planned. It's a short one. And I'm going to have to ask us, this is for 3 volunteers. So we're all going to start with our cameras off. Go ahead and switch your camera off. Great. And now we need 3 brave volunteers to step into the unknown, and 3 people are going to turn their cameras on just to play this next game. I see 1, I see 2, 1 more. 3, great. Brett, Adam, and Teresa, first off, thank you for taking the risk of just showing up without knowing what's going on. It's an enormous part of improv is getting comfortable with the unknown, and you've already demonstrated at least a little bit of that. So let me elaborate on what we're about to do. The 3 of you are going to just play a little scenario. I'm going to cast you all in a role as high-powered ad agency executives. The 3 of you are the very top of the command chain. You have an almost unlimited budget. And what your task is to do, in a moment, I'm going to ask chat to type in the suggestion of just a normal everyday item that we see advertised for. And your job altogether is to brainstorm an ad campaign, right? We want to know, like, okay, what are the billboards going to look like? Who are the celebrity endorsements? Is there a radio jingle, right, that we'll need? Is there a 30-second like Super Bowl spot, right? So you can come up with anything. The challenge of this game is to really look at yes and, which means to not come up with 1,000 little one-step ideas, but to hear what someone else has given and add on to that, to develop details and specificities about the idea that just came before, just responding to just what was just said, rather than let me bring my own stuff in and start from the beginning again. Does that kind of make sense? Great. Yes. So in chat, why don't someone type in just an ordinary everyday object that might need an ad campaign around it? Just anything in a store somewhere, or suggestions in the chat, maybe? Anyone? There we go. A blender. Perfect. Thank you, Judy. So the 3 of you are going to come up with an ad campaign for a blender. You can take yourselves off mute and begin.
So I think for this new blender, we need to make the best logo possible.
Okay. I was thinking for the logo, we can use the colors of the blender, which is blue, gray, and red, and really make it pop. Maybe like a Superman theme.
Oh, that's great. And then I think we can develop a billboard that includes the colors, and that theme will run through billboards and a social media campaign.
Yes, and I think for the billboards, we need to stack 3 billboards on top of each other, make the logo huge, just to get our point across that this is the best and strongest blender.
Now, when you say stacking them, do you mean vertically or like in front of each other? Because we could go like a cube, like a giant 3x3 cube.
Yes, that's not the idea I was going for, but now that you say it, that's an even better idea. We could go through like a 3D cube, turn it on its side, actually on the side axis, so it's tilted, looks like a Rubik's Cube.
Yes, I think that's a good avenue to follow. We can use also a media campaign for television commercials and use that cube as the symbol for demonstrating the power of the blender.
Yes, and I think for the television commercials, we can produce them and then project them onto the moon and show the entire world what the commercial is.
Okay, I think that's a good idea. And we can also maybe reflect that off of the moon and transmit it across the entire hemisphere of the galaxy, kind of like a full three-dimensional sphere.
And see, nicely done, everyone. Fantastic. Let me ask just the three of you real quick. We can turn our cameras back on, kind of arrive all back together if you'd like. But I want to ask the three of you, how was that inside of there? You stepped up into this. You didn't even know what the exercise would be. How was it?
It was
It's
fun.
a little daunting to, step into the unknown and have to come up with ideas and create something.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's easier to build upon things than to say no, because it's easier to take something and then add to it.
Yeah. It's almost like the first step is always the hardest. And then once the ball is rolling, like we can really get lost in the idea of a thing for brainstorming. And part of that we can't do unless we are really hearing, oh, what is the part of this that excites me, right? To listen to our own intuition about like, okay, I hear your idea, and what you came up with, actually, I would consider buying that blender if I saw one of those like giant cubes, especially if you're projecting it to the moon and across the galaxy. That's a powerful message. Yeah. So again, in this fictional scenario, right, it can be anything we want, but we still feel the like, it's got to be good, right? It has to be something. And one of the things that improv gets us through is, in order to have one good idea, sometimes we first have to have 1,000 bad ones, right? So to approach any problem by removing the judgment of it, of like, okay, we're not even looking at these as like good or bad ideas. Some of the most like creative ad campaigns I've ever seen, if you explained it to me on paper, I would probably think like, well, that sounds dumb, right? Like I'm thinking of the Budweiser frogs, right? It's like, that sounds ridiculous. And yet it was like a media sensation. Someone had to say yes to that idea. So yeah, the idea of creating generously as many ideas as we want to build up on ideas. These are all things that we practice during improv sessions. I want to open up the floor just for any general questions, responses, thoughts about improv training, questions you might have, and just to get the conversation started. Oh, I see, Joni, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, I do. Hi, everybody. I think one of the things that helps improv is just being able to talk about what your idea is, because you had seen the frogs on paper, you probably wouldn't have bought into it. But the more you're into an idea, the more animated you become, the more you can bring people either who are on Zoom, for example, or in the room, you can bring them along with you, and that excitement becomes infectious. And you can kind of make people see what your vision is. And I think that goes a long way towards selling whatever it is that you're selling, be it an idea or, a blender.
Yeah. Either excitement or just really like understanding and believing in what your work is. I think that feeling is transmissible to others. If I hear someone explaining something and I can tell like, okay, they've thought this through, like they really like this idea, let me hear more. I think that can, even in a room full of people who have never thought about like improv or trying to meet an idea with yes, sometimes it's enough to get across. Yeah, it's a great observation. Other thoughts about improv training in general, or oh, I lost my train of thought, what I was about to ask. But yeah, any thoughts or comments so far?
The other thing that I appreciate is how diverse the thinking is. Sometimes we think that everybody thinks similar to us, and to be able to give everybody an opportunity to contribute, then you can see the diversity, you can see the different perspectives, which I think is huge, especially in our culture today, to be respectful and open to other ways of thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, to meet an unfamiliar idea without judgment, with curiosity instead, but also to make space for it, right? Like we're not going to hear a divergent viewpoint, or we're not going to hear something that's other than what we already think, unless we literally make room for it, unless we learn to be quiet and open our ears, right? Just to hear. And that works on a number of different axes of diversity, right? To have a bunch of different lived experiences in the room, but even in any organization that's structured top to bottom, right? If the top of the pyramid is not listening to the people on the bottom, or not making room for feedback from people who have their boots on the ground, you don't know everything, right? You can't know everything. And so to invite those voices is actually a critical thing for institutional health.
And Nick, Penny's comment makes me think of one of my favorite improv sayings that translates into applied improv as well. Bring a brick, not a cathedral. The idea that you don't bring the whole thing already made, you just bring a piece of it and we'll all work together to build it. So that's one of the core tenets that we try to apply, and that sort of pithy saying of bring a brick, not a cathedral is at the core of improv training.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that you needn't think you have to do it all by yourself. You can rely on each other. You can take support, not just give support. And yeah, I love that phrase too. One brick at a time. Bring a brick, not a cathedral, works really well for building a scene on stage, or again, a prototype idea, new organizational ideas, anything at all. Cool. Other thoughts? Last thoughts before we kind of call it a workshop? Oh yeah, Brett, go ahead.
Question, and it seems like by acknowledging someone else's thoughts and ideas, even if you don't agree with that idea or want to implement it, you give them space and you let them know that you're on their side. And it seems like they're more likely to agree with your ideas similarly.
Yes, yeah. This skill works almost in every scenario. It works best when it is in a room where it is mutually expected and agreed upon, right? I will listen to your ideas. The expectation is you'll listen to mine. You're not going to find that in every pairing. If you're working with, procurement from other agencies, say, who don't know you or don't care about you, if it's going to be a long-term relationship, then it's worth investing in what I think allows for that, and that's trust, right? The more I know you, the more I understand what's important to you, the more I make my negotiations in good faith, the more that you see my ideas have some validity, even if you might not agree with them at first. Yeah, that builds up over time. But yeah, a good observation is, there's kind of a mutual expectation of that. Yeah, cool. So, Glenn, I want to thank you for bringing us all together. Do you want to make some closing remarks?
Yeah, thanks so much, Nick, and really appreciate it, John, Christina, and Nick, and all the time that you've spent with the various networks that we've brought you into, and we hope to continue to be able to and to follow the evolution of how this is playing out in your organization, and in the future, hopefully seeing how this might be adapted and how others are making use of it in their organization. We have several networks that you variously got word of this workshop in. We'll be inviting you to participate more in those. I have to say, I always get some kind of really interesting takeaway with this group. today Nick gave me the concept of competent mistakes. So all my mistakes in the future are going to be competent ones. That'll be my New Year's resolution. I like that. I'm gonna. That's the best thing from today. Thank you, Nick, for that. There's going to be a quick evaluation that goes out right after we close. I really encourage, please just take a couple of minutes, shoot us back your quick thoughts on how this went for you, what ideas you might have for how we might follow this up, or what are other topics that our networks might be able to bring out to the community. We're always looking for innovative ideas to share from your organization or others that you know of as well. Stay in touch with us, and we will do the same with you. Thanks again to our presenters, and I'm wishing you all a great end of the year and hope to see you at a future program in 2023. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks all. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.